superintendent evaluation. He's over here.
Was that the one with all the sheets and everything? Okay, yeah.
No, I'm actually, you know, working Monday.
Influence.
Okay.
And I'll be off.
I can do that. I'll have to clean it out though.
So I'll be off from the 23rd until January. So I have one more day. I had about.
Do you have a big family, a large family, small?
I had about 3 weeks that I needed to use this for the
Parents still alive?
so it is kind of squeezing me in here. Like I said, I got one more.
Good evening, everyone. I will call our meeting to order and declare we have a quorum and look for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Crickle?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Garden? I'll vote yes. Are we on, Doug? Is he over there? Doug, are we on? Okay. All right. We're going to take a no vote on that one. Moving on to 1.04, we'll move to our Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Stryker, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to 1.05. We have our schools of the month, and we are going to start with Kratz.
Well, first, good evening and thank you for having us here tonight. It's always a pleasure to come to you with some good things that are happening in our building. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce the teachers and administrator that we have with us. We have Ms. McNulty, our assistant principal, Anna Schrader, one of our kindergarten teachers, Melanie West, one of our kindergarten teachers, and Mrs. Waring, who is also a kindergarten teacher. So we are happy to be here to share some of our learning and our teaching related to equity. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. McNulty at this time.
Okay, well, good evening. As we started to think about tonight's presentation, we noticed that a lot of the work that we've been doing at Kratz this year was highly related to the equity statement. And specifically, it was related to number 4 of the equity statement, statement 4, that was about providing anti-biased, anti-racist learning opportunities for our students. And so we've been working really hard to think about ways to make sure that we're doing that in our classrooms. And so, you took my notes. And so our kindergarten team is with us tonight to share some of the experiences that they've had with their students, but also all of our teams have been working to think of ways to infuse equity in what they're doing in the classroom. And so before we get started about the lessons that they've been doing with students, we wanted to talk about why is equity so important and why now? We are at a crossroads in our society where we can either go down two paths. The first path is really what we've always been doing and not making an impact at all, really. And so the other path would be much more intentional, bringing conversations, bringing learning experiences to our staff, to our students, so that we can help them understand how important equity is within our schools and within our society. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna. She's going to share a little bit of background.
Hello. So people of color living in poverty is not just an issue here in Missouri. Here and across the United States, both African American and Hispanic individuals live in poverty at much higher rates than their white counterparts.
Hello. Hi. So this image illustrates for us that our people of color are sentenced to prison at disproportionate higher rates, with Black people making up only 12% of the adult population. You can see that they represented 33% of incarcerated adults, while white people during the same time, on the other hand, made up 64% of the adult population and represented only 30% of the incarcerated adults. This highlights the inequities in our justice system.
So not only are poverty and incarceration rates alarming, but the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted some of the inequities as well. As you can see, Black persons are over 2.5 times more likely to contract COVID and twice as more likely to die from it. And Hispanic folks are also disproportionately afflicted by COVID, with almost 3 times the likelihood of contracting COVID and still more likely to pass than white folks. Race and ethnicity are both markers for other underlying conditions, and one of those being the lack of access to health care. And so they're put in a situation where they are much more at risk, and their employment is also one of the reasons that they likely contract it and die from it at a higher rate. Often folks of color are frontline workers, often in essential positions that don't allow them to have the luxury of working from home or taking leave. So the pandemic has certainly highlighted some of the inequities that we see in our society.
Hello. So thinking of that information that we just presented, of course, asks us to look at what are the demographics for Kratz Elementary, but also, thinking of Ritenour as a whole, being a minority majority district, and looking at our demographics at Kratz alone should tell us that we should be paying very close attention to equity.
So the cultural and political climate are also things that bring us to the conclusion that we really need to be intentional and pay close attention to what we're teaching in the way of equity in our schools. As you can see, our recent past with the Muslim ban and the Black Lives Matter movement, the call to build the wall, and our recent adoption of the Ritenour equity statement, along with the pandemic, all underscore the need to make changes in the way that we deal with equity in our buildings and the things that we teach in our classrooms. Oops, sorry.
Again, thinking of Kratz, we don't want there to be any misunderstanding. We have been working on equity, and that's not new to us. These are all our efforts that you can see to date, and we've been working on that for as long as I've been with the district, which has been maybe 19 years, something like that. But we are focusing this year, we do want to start being much more explicit about our teaching as it relates to equity, and that therefore is why we've made these grade level commitments.
So some of you might be thinking, how are you going to teach equity explicitly to kindergarten students? You might be thinking, wow, they're too young for something like that. But research really tells us otherwise. By age 3, children begin to form judgments about people based on race. Young children can identify easily differences in other people. They make decisions and judgments by observing the world around them, and sadly, the world tells them that race matters. It is important that we break our silence and recognize that our silence is a part of privilege and have conversations about race with our students.
All right, so with that information, as a kindergarten team and as part of our grade level work, our commitment towards our equity work, we have outlined lesson plans, and these have begun. We've already implemented these. The first one you see is very important because we wanted to give our children the vocabulary for these concepts that they are already recognizing. So equity versus equality was really an important idea for us to introduce to our children so that they were able to then use those words in their own conversations. And so the first lesson is a simulation. In person, this might look like assigning an activity where we're all going to draw trees. And while everybody gets a box of crayons, one person or a few friends might not get a brown crayon. And then the questions arise like, how am I supposed to do this without my brown crayon? So it comes about very organically, and I know that the other teachers can speak to this too. Do I need to give everybody brown crayons now? Am I going to be equal and give everybody a brown crayon? They know, they recognize, no, I don't need one, I have one, I'm good. So these conversations come about. In a virtual setting, which is how I'm an RVA teacher, and I'm relying much more on the images. So we bring about these images. I'm getting nervous now. You can hear it in my voice.
Okay, no problem. Like this. So the images, the one you're seeing is of the sunflower. So the first slide shows that one of equally passing everything out. They all have the nice little stool, and yet you have the one little sunflower who cannot reach the sun. You know, that's giving everybody the same thing, but using that image and having that conversation of, well, what could we do to help the little sunflower reach the sun and get what it needs? And the kids were really good at, well, just, you know, you can give them one that they need too, and the other sunflower doesn't need that. So the visual itself really helped illuminate the need.
Thanks, I've got my voice back now. So the rest of the lessons kind of rely on mentor texts that we have looked at, and the books 1, 0, 1, 2, and 0 are by Catherine Itoshi, and these are really beautiful books. If you have not seen them yet, I would recommend them. The one I'll talk about is called 1, and this is a book that has these organic colors, organic shaped colors, and one thinks that it's a little hotter than the other ones. The red is hot and everything else is not. And while the other colors come to the blue, who has been, kind of taunted, it's not enough just to comfort. Nobody stands up and says it's wrong until this strong shape, this number 1, comes up and says, no, we're not going to allow it. And so everybody else wants to count and takes on their own form, takes on their own voice. And so it's a really beautiful text, and it leads to a lot of neat activities and different conversation points. So will you switch it on over for me? All right, and then along with our lesson plans, we just always want to make sure that we are intentional about the materials that we are providing. We always are cognizant to provide windows and mirrors for our children so that they see themselves reflected in the positive text. And that is about all my voice can handle right now. Anybody else want to speak to this? We do have time for questions.
So do you have questions for the team about the work that they're doing with equity?
I have one question. On your demographics, it doesn't equal 100. So what is the part that's missing?
We have students who are Asian and just a variety of other students who aren't included in that. We were primarily highlighting the largest groups there.
So Dr. Stryker, as you're having, and teachers, as you're having these conversations with students around equity, how are you involving parents and families in these conversations?
Well, I know that the teachers are sharing information with families on Seesaw, and the activities that are there are available for families as well. We do have the idea of creating sort of a list of good books that could be read at home. Our library is also going to be purchasing some of the books that we have found in the for read alouds, and so children will be able to check those out. We do have some of them already in the library, but a number of them are new to the world of children's literature, so we'll be purchasing those for the library as well.
Thanks.
What's the response of the kids? Like, how are they?
I so far have taught that first lesson with the 2 visual posters, and I really kind of wasn't sure. And I was actually very shocked that they are much more aware really than I realized. And, you know, when you're passing out fruit snacks to them to say, here, everybody gets one, or you give the whole basket to just one of them, they quickly pipe up with, that's not fair. You know, being able to see that, well, why is that not fair? You know, well, because you need to give everybody one. You need to do it. I said, oh, well, that's equality. Everybody gets the same. And then looking again at the poster, it was the conversation, like she said, came about very organically. I don't need it. You know, I said, well, why not? Didn't you tell me I have to pass out everything all the same? No, I don't need it. So I'm just being able to connect that to give them the bigger vocabulary word came about pretty much easier than I really thought. And then kind of looking at, you know, the next conversation will be kind of like, how do we help get people what they need? Because there's many visuals out there. There's a sunflower. I also looked at one that was, you know, a little kid trying to peek over a fence. The adult can see, the kid cannot. Well, the adult doesn't need the box to stand on, but the kid does. And well, what are you going to do when you see somebody who needs something? And then we're going to kind of read the story 1 and talk about standing up and helping others. So it really did give a good starting point to easily talk about it.
Other questions?
Well, thank you guys very much.
Well, thank you very much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for your work.
Yep. Now we'll have our Weiland family come forward.
Good evening, and thank you very much for giving Mila the opportunity to be here as well. And tonight we're going to be talking to you about writing and reading conferences. And with me this evening is Miss Katie Johnson. She is one of our kindergarten teachers. So yay, kindergarten. We are very represented here. Dr. Gunn is with us this evening as well. And then Miss Sydney Trusty, one of our 5th grade teachers who will be teaching Ritenour Virtual Academy, was supposed to be here and is unable to join us. So I'm going to do my very best to fill in for her part tonight. Can you hear me without this, or do you want me to use?
If you could use it for the
Okay, I feel like I have such a loud teacher voice, but I will use this as well. Okay, so since we were not able to bring students with us tonight, we have included several pictures of students and their quotes because we want their voice to be heard, because that's what Reading and Writing Workshop is all about. And conferences really give us that opportunity to hear directly from our students. So in thinking about the vision, the part that jumps out to us here is when we think about students who will become, that will produce graduates who will become productive citizens. We know that writing is essential and reading is essential, whether students choose to be college or military or career ready. In the mission, the part that jumped out to us is that really thinking about developing those knowledge and skills, that's what conferring does. It gives teachers opportunities to meet one-on-one with students and then also with small groups and whole class to really develop those skills so that students not only feel successful, but that they can transfer that knowledge to other areas in their lives. For the equity statement, these were two areas that popped out to us that when we think about students who will see themselves and their culture represented throughout the building and district, reading and writing is a time for them to do that, when they can really focus on their experiences and share those with their classmates and their teachers, and also that it's all about student voice. And then thinking about teachers will embed cultural competency, cultural responsiveness, and trauma-informed practices into their teaching and interactions with students. We know that reading and writing, those are areas that some of our students really struggle with. And so the more that we learn about culturally responsive strategies and trauma-informed strategies, teachers are able to really meet the needs of students so that they can be the best readers and writers. So a couple of years ago, we have started working with the writing strategies book, and you may remember Miss Fry came with her whole entire class and talked about writing. And so now we are really looking at the reading conferences book by the same author, and that's something that we're doing with the district. All of our 4th and 5th grade teachers are learning about reading conferences and getting professional development. We had a session in the past, and we'll have another one in January. And that pairs directly with the reading strategies book. So our teachers have had a really easy time because they know the writing strategies book, being able to use that. It's an excellent resource. It actually is a textbook that a lot of our students who come from Mizzou and Maryville, they've used these in their college studies. So that's been really wonderful. And you're going to hear more about these books in just a moment. So I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Johnson.
Hi, everyone. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about Writers Workshop with you. As Dr. Greenstein said, it's a really great opportunity for students to kind of gain ownership, and it's a really unique opportunity in kindergarten because a lot of skills are being developed during that time. We see a lot of growth that occurs during the year, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the components of our Writers Workshop is. So the first part, and one of the main focuses, is setting those goals. So goals are set during our independent work time. I work really hard early on to build really a sense of independence with our kindergartners. They can handle it, they're ready for it, they crave it. I use a format where I ask what they're working on or what they need help with, so I know where they need the support. And then from there, I look for teaching moments, a complement of what they already have done. And then also we turn that into goals for the next opportunity. Generally, when we think of goals, we really want students to have the ability to choose the goals they're working on. But early on in kindergarten, I like to kind of guide, at least at the beginning, to help steer their writing as they get stronger in that focus. In the picture you see here, that's the format I use. It's a very simple form, but it really helps allow for me to take notes on what students are doing. Again, it just has those components of the complement, teaching point, and the goal setting that we have. And I typically do this, as you can see in the picture as well, where I sit and get to hear their writing that they're working on, and then from there see where they might need the most support. And I usually use Post-it notes and things like that, not only in my binder that I keep, but also give them a kid-friendly version that also helps remind them of what they're working on. So one of the ways that we wanted to share our student voices is by just asking them the simple question, how are you a writer? And it was really interesting, the responses we got and what that shares about how they feel in their writing. So one of the first things, I can draw and write the words. I can do any story that I think of by myself. And I think in those words alone, it kind of shows the power of Writer's Workshop. It shows they have ownership of what they want to write. They are excited about what they want to do, and they know they can do it all on their own. Another student, I know how to write by myself, and it is fun making books. And again, when I heard their responses, it was really cool just to see the joy that they are having during that time, because writing is hard in kindergarten. It's new. There's a lot of aspects that they might not have had experiences with before, and it's just a way for them to express themselves. Sorry, the page is stuck. So like I said, in kindergarten, there are a lot of changes that happen in the writing process. Kindergartners go through a wide range of steps in their writing, and at any given point, I may see multiple developmental stages that you can see on the slide here. And that's the great component of Writer's Workshop, is that it allows me as their teacher to work at whatever level they're at. So even if they are early on and just writing letters and just experiencing print for the first time, I can help support them. I have some students who are writing sentences and who are starting to show that understanding of the writing process, and I can support them and see if I can help them take that step further. And I know it's probably hard to see on there, but I have the different stages of students that I currently am working with as well. So as I said, there's a lot of developmental levels. One of my students, the one on your left, he is working on just drawings, his pictures. His fine motor skills are still really getting that work that they need, and he's getting to add some letters or words, as we call them in our room, to his picture. And then my friend on the right, she is working on adding her sentences, and her goal right now is adding spaces between her words to make it more easy to read. And so as Dr. Greenstein said, we're working on the Writing Strategies book, which is filled with lots of great strategies that I can incorporate with my students. So again, when we're asking that question, how are you a writer? I'm a great writer, and I can write using my ABC chart, and that's part of those strategies. He knows that he has those tools he needs to write, and he knows where they are and how to use them to help support his writing. We also have different visuals in the classroom that help our students. We review them, when we start Writer's Workshop. Right now, we're looking at our level of writing, where we're at and where we want to go. So there's level 1, 2, and 3, and they're just really excited. They almost view it as a game of sorts, like, okay, my level 1 is like this. How can I make it a level 2? And it's really exciting because they're starting to notice, like in my examples, they'll say, oh, Ms. Johnson, that's not a level 2 yet, you need to add pictures and a couple of words. Or that's not a level 3 yet, you need to add more details. So it's really neat to see them taking the visuals that we have and actually using them. And then one of the final parts of our Writer's Workshop is actually the author's chair, celebrating their writing that they worked hard to do. So we incorporate sharing time at the end of every Writer's Workshop, and they know that it can be one page they worked on. Maybe they just finished a whole story and they want to share it, and each student gets to share what they're working on. I'll pick a couple each day, and then actually at the end of our writing unit, we'll have a whole author celebration where they actually will all get to pick one final writing piece they've been working on. So it's a really cool time, and I think it's an opportunity not only to take pride in their writing, but it also gets them up in front of their peers, and they get to do public speaking at a very safe level for them. And they know they have the support of me. I'm right there on the side, ready to help them if they forgot a word or what they are needing to share. And it's just really an exciting way to celebrate the whole component of Writer's Workshop. So thank you.
And I really want to thank Ms. Johnson because not only is she a wonderful teacher for our students, she has also been teaching our new staff about writing workshop and welcoming them into her room and having conversations and conferences with them as well. So Dr. Gunn and I really, really appreciate that. So again, I'm going to do my best here to share Ms. Trustee's part. And you're going to hear a lot of similarities, not only between kindergarten and 5th grade, but between the process of reading conferences and writing conferences. And also, I just have to give a huge shout out to our teachers for figuring out how to do all of this, whether it's in a hybrid setting. You saw what that looks like and how, and Ms. Johnson and our teachers, they just, walk 6 squares away and put their chair down so that they can still have those individual conversations with students. And then also you're going to see Ms. Trustee, who is in a virtual setting in 5th grade, and she will also continue that because she's one of our Ritenour Virtual Academy teachers. So there are several kinds of reading conferences that we're learning about, and the assessment conference is where we start. And you heard Ms. Johnson talking about learning about what the student is doing as a writer. Same thing, what is the student doing as a reader? We're going to share a little bit about a checklist that is in the reading conference book that has been really helpful. And then talking about goal setting conferences. And as Ms. Johnson shared, this is about the student, letting the student have that ownership, being really excited about what they want to work on. And so we have really seen a lot of engagement in the virtual setting because of the format that Ms. Trustee and our teachers are using. And then she also is using the reading strategies book to choose those strategies to teach. And again, one of our major outcomes in all of this is having that student voice. And so this is Ms. Trustee. She's using Epic books. Some of our students do have books at home, but not all of them. And so we're able to use Epic books to figure out what level they are on. And you see Ms. Trustee working with the student. And I know one of the things that our teachers are really enjoying is to really get to know their students. Some of them have reading spots that are in their bedrooms. Sorry, my page is stuck too. Some have reading spots that they've set up, under a bunk bed. There are all kinds of things. And so their first lesson was to set up a reading spot. Where are you going to be able to do your reading? And then for the assessment conference, this is a form that our teachers have been using that lists a lot of different strategies. Some of our students are very reflective and they know what their strengths and their challenges are as a reader. Others need some guidance, and so this form helps teachers to ask some really good questions so that it's not about the teacher's voice all the time, it's about asking the right questions to hear the student voice. And this is one of the Epic books, so you may be hearing about this. This is a really awesome way for our students to be able to have books on their level and to do it virtually. And so again, Ms. Trustee is there with some students. Then she decides what they're going to work on, and these groups are based on the students, and she's able to put some groups together. And these are very fluid groups. So this is not like when I was in school and you were in a reading group and you stay in that reading group forever. This is based on skills that students need. And so this one was about reading expression. I know that she has also done groups about summarizing reading, focusing on main characters, and understanding the main ideas. So one of the ways that Ms. Trustee is figuring out how the students need to be grouped is by using iExcel. And that is a program that we are using across the district. And it is a computer-based program, and it focuses on the ELA standards. And so it aligns directly to our curriculum and our resources that we have. And what's great about this is that Ms. Trustee can assign some of those skills, and then students also can be working at grade level or above grade level, or they can also be working, some of these strategy groups are kind of stopping up those gaps that they may have so that they continue their progress as a reader. This has been a really helpful checklist. This is what can I work on as a reader? And so students and teachers can look at this to really see what are areas that we've already mastered and we don't need to focus on. And then what are some areas that we might want to have a strategy group, or maybe this is where I'm working on during conferring. And so again, this has been really, really helpful. And each of the students has their own reading portfolio in Google Slides, and they decorate it and it has everything in there. And it includes that form. And now they're starting to add their IXL data in there as well so that they can track their progress. And as they're learning these different strategies, they're seeing the increase in their IXL scores. And so that's been really exciting to them. So since we couldn't have students with us today, here are some quotes, and these are direct quotes that they gave. And as you read through these, you're gonna read some common themes. You're gonna see that there is a lot of motivation. Students are really gaining that confidence. All three of them really like that choice. Students want to have choice in what they're reading, what they're learning, how they can progress as a reader. There definitely are comments in here about the DRA, which is assessment that we have used in the past, which clearly was not their favorite. And what they like about the conferences, and it's more authentic. They're getting that relationship with the teacher. They're getting to talk about what they're reading, and they don't feel like there's some test that's saying, you don't know how to do this. Instead, it's that growth mindset of, you don't know how to do this yet, so let's figure out how we can do it together. And definitely you see in here, it's about building confidence. Our students are really gaining that confidence as readers. And you saw in Ms. Johnson's presentation, they're gaining confidence as writers as well. Does anybody have any questions for us?
I really like what you're doing. I think it's such an innovative way to get kids just interested in writing. And it is so important, like you said. I know Wyland is kind of famous for that. I remember the Wise Write program, which was amazing. So yeah, this is just so creative, and I just love everything about this.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Ms. Johnson, Dr. Greenstein. So Ms. Johnson, you're teaching in a hybrid format,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So how many students in person do you have on a daily basis?
Between 7 and 8 usually, which has been a really unique and kind of, as a teacher who's had 23 kindergartners at a time or more, it really allows for one-on-one, but even more so, because before I might only get maybe 4 or 5 minutes with a student in order to fit everyone in for the whole week one time. I generally can almost meet with, when they're here 2 days a week, I can meet with each student almost the whole time, which is a really unique opportunity for our kindergartners this year.
So based on that, what type of gains are you seeing in students' literacy?
I am seeing the progress in their writing a little bit quicker. I was a little bit worried about with not seeing them as often, but I have seen, the students who are past a certain level, they're able to then take those skills and move forward. I'm noticing the stories that they're coming up with specifically for writing are more detailed, and the words they're using are really, they're adding to their stories, where before it might just be like, I like books. Now they're kind of telling me a story about them going to the library or something similar to that, which is really neat.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for coming and showing us all that. And to both, where does she need to put the, I guess leave the clicker up there.
Okay, I guess to give it to someone. Yeah.
Oh. So thank you so much to all of our staff and teachers for coming and presenting on each of the schools. It was good information. And it's always good to see the kids even if they're on the screen. All right, moving on to 1.06, I'd like to report that the Board of Education met in closed session on November 12, 2020 for the purpose of discussion of personnel agenda items. Moving on to 1.07, we have public comments. And I have 3 here. them in order in which they came in. The first one is Miss Davy. When I call you guys, just come up to the screen and sit up there. Yep.
May I stand? Yes. Thank you. I'll go ahead and pull this up as well for people who might be online. Well, thank you so much for allowing space for public comments and continuing the good dedication to the democracy that is built around our school boards. We really do appreciate that as staff. And I want to start by sharing that I come to you tonight not as an employee of the district, but truly as a member of this community. And I want to reiterate that in my 9 years here, I don't see myself as a mere employee. I take that part very seriously, obviously, thank you for the job. But I want to make sure that I reiterate my my sense of belongingness and freedom and empowerment and dedication to service for this district. That is something that's deeply important to me. I wanted to begin tonight by sharing that I'm here tonight not to provide any special inspiration, but out of a deep conviction of my heart, particularly surrounding the idea of building healthy communities that are healthy, yes, in body, but also in spirit, in the way that we relate to one another, in the way that we act in unity. You know, one of the things I do as an educator that I take very seriously in my job is teaching civics education. And as a music educator, it might look a little different than you might anticipate, but I know that for my students, it's important to teach perspective taking and the ability to empathize with multiple viewpoints. That's something that I believe is foundational for their experience as citizens and active citizens in this democracy. And so therefore, I enter knowing that I'm seeking to empathize with the positions here. Deeply thankful for your commitment to service as public servants of this community that I love and hold so dear. Knowing that we are in a situation that none of you would have anticipated when you took your oaths and committed to do this work. And I also ask that within that spirit of empathy and perspective taking, I would be honored to speak for a moment and share a bit of my perspective, a bit of my heart. Again, as an employee of Ritenour for 9 years, we have seen each other, here, me with you, in a few different capacities. Typically, as I've had the chance to talk to the board, I come offering myself as a representative, either of teachers across the state as your Missouri Teacher of the Year, or in the perspective of other organizational and teacher recruitment strategies that we are trying at the state level. But tonight, I'm offering only a personal narrative. So I would like to ask that even though it is a personal narrative, I want to ask for your patience as I go through this, because I'm not typically emotional, but I may become less rational than I would perceive myself to be. So I was able to write in a letter to you all in November, I'm not sure if you received it or not, that I've had a bit of an experience of myself with COVID-19. I found myself going throughout the summer, I've been very cautious to follow all guidelines and expectations set forth to me, partly because I want to make sure that I'm maintaining health for my personal community, but also because I care deeply about my students. And so when it was announced in September that we would be returning to hybrid learning for pre-K through third grade students, I made sure even more so to restrict all of my movements for the 14 days prior to knowing that students would be walking in the building. So no grocery stores, moving away. I saw one group of people, it's about 10 feet away from me outside. So it was a few of my cousins and another one, I sat around a bonfire with people. Those were my only interactions. I want to be very honest about that because a week after teaching in the hybrid environment, I was diagnosed with COVID-19. My symptoms were typical to the list. I have never experienced a moment in life where I found it difficult to breathe. For those of you who know me well, you know that speech typically does not come as a hardship for me. I can talk a little bit too much. And yet I found that lung strength and capacity was truly diminished. I was out of the school building for 3 weeks. It has now been 8 weeks since my initial symptoms. And as I share with a colleague walking in tonight, it is still difficult for me to catch my breath walking from my car up and through a parking lot.
And again, I share this not to say that I am meant to be pitied or that I am a unique story. I know that I am just one of now millions of Americans who've experienced this disease. But I do share this because I have wonderings in my mind, and I want to communicate some of the pieces of processing that I've had to go through as a community member who's experienced this. As I mentioned, I cannot guarantee any point or locus of infection, and yet I have wondered over the past several weeks if I would be ill had we not returned to hybrid learning. I am not an epidemiologist. I am not a virologist. I'm grateful to be a music teacher. It is a job that I deeply love. And yet there are so many elements within this pandemic that we are not entirely sure of, including the long-term health effects and mental effects. I will share that even today, as I was teaching, occasionally my brain completely blanks and I have no idea who the students are in my classroom because of long-term memory loss.
Ms. Davey?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
5?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for continuing this.
You can, if you want to finish a point, and then, are you okay?
Oh, I can say a sentence.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate following the expectations as well. I did want to let you know that Ritenour teachers are indeed worn out. There is a perception of not being heard, and yet I know that that is not the intention of this body. So as we move forward into building healthier community, it is my hope and my aim as a member of this community to continue to build bridges and opportunities so that all of us together might seek what is commonly good for our Ritenour kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, I have Sarah Phillips Morgan.
Well, hello, school board members. I am no longer a parent of a Ritenour student. My 4th grader, who had been a part of the Ritenour district since kindergarten, is now in his 2nd week of 5-day in-person private school. And I have to say that in just a short time, we have seen major changes in him. There have been some bumps in the road because it's a new school and new expectations, but I feel like a weight has been lifted off of his shoulders. He has started to relearn responsibility. I mean, he was the laziest kid while he was in virtual because there were really no standards he had to meet. You know, he didn't have to get up and do anything, but he has started relearning responsibility. His tantrums and breakdowns have significantly diminished, and the ones that he has now are short-lived. Most importantly, he has rediscovered his love of learning and is eager to tell us something he has learned every day when we pick him up from school. So we are very pleased with how it's worked out for him. So why am I here? Well, I know my family is not the only one that has made the decision to leave the district. I know that there are others that feel like the district is leaving their children behind, so they have left. But I also know that there are many more who would love to make that choice, but because of their income restrictions or however the number of children they have to privately educate, it's just cost prohibitive. They want these options, they just don't have them. So I'm here for them, but I'm also here because I have a 4-year-old that I would actually really love to put in Ritenour for kindergarten. But I need to know that he'll be coming to a district that is actually going to support him as a student. So tonight I just have one question for the board, and I know that this isn't a discussion period, it's a comment period, but I think this is a question that the board really needs to answer. I think the parents of our district who know that in-person education is what is best for their students, and they can see how they are struggling now, both educationally and mentally and socially. These parents need you to answer this question. They deserve an answer to it. You guys, I've heard you say countless times that you're following the data and the recommendations that have been given, but that is simply not the case because the CDC has recommended all along that kids be able to be in person. I sent a thing to you last week that was from C-SPAN, And it had a clip in there from the CDC director that said these same words back in November, and I know that's not the first time he has said them. Even our county has sent things out months ago saying, okay, yeah, elementary kids can go back. And then after that, they said middle and high schoolers can go back. And these haven't been followed. So I really just want you guys to answer in your meeting time later when you get to have your own comments, or preferably in a letter to the parents that really want their kids in person. Why are you not following the recommendations that have been given that say that it's not only safe, but it's preferable to give an option for kids to be in person? That there may be some spread. I mean, nothing is 100% guaranteed, but they say that it's safe, that the spread is really not going on in school, and even for older kids, that actually it's better because they're not out just wandering the streets, they're in a structured environment. I want to know why. I don't know if it's because you don't trust these organizations, and if that's the case, then why do you follow any of their recommendations? You know, you shouldn't follow any of their standards if it's because we don't trust what the CDC says and what the county had said months ago. Is it because you have better information? Then please share that with us, because we'd all be happy to know. Is it because of the demands of the NEA saying they didn't want to be in person? I just think that we need a clear answer, and it can't be, well, numbers are going up, because these recommendations were put out months ago when the numbers were not high, and yet we still found reasons not to let kids back in school. So I'm just here to ask you to please answer this question. Why are we not following these recommendations? Why didn't we follow them? Why aren't we following them now? And please let the parents know that you are committed that when it comes second semester, the kids will be able to be in school buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And the last one I have is from Christina Melly.
Small hands always take so much longer with hand sanitizer. All right. Good evening, board members and everyone out there on YouTube. I've been proud to be a Ritenour teacher at the high school for the last 9 years. Prior to that, I was a substitute teacher in the Ritenour district and an adult education teacher. And prior to that, I was a Ritenour graduate. So I say all of that for folks who may not know me to right away establish that I have loved, lived, and worked for this community for as long as I have memory. I have been here, and my family still lives here. My brothers still live here, my mother, my grandparents, and for anyone that I've ever been on the other side of a Zoom with or the other side of a conference table with, you know that I don't come to waste people's time. So I'll be very quick and very brief. What some of you may also know about me is that I've previously been the debate coach for the high school. So I'm going to do something that surprises you, and I'm going to start with where we all agree. Because I think that there's much more common ground than necessarily we've been able to see the last 9 months, because we have all been struggling, because we have all been afraid. We have a lot of things in common, and that's really what I want to take a moment to bring us back to, especially as we enter the holiday season, at which point all of us are going to need a lot more agreement, or we're going to eat far too many cookies, and that's not going to be good for any of us. Things we agree on. We all agree. No parents who are here, no parents who are at home, no teachers, school board members, administrators. No one would disagree that the first thing we need is for our community to be safe. The second thing that we all agree on, all of us know that we need our kids to be learning. We know that the way that the world is, we cannot afford for them to stand still or to move backwards. We understand that. And we all recognize, I don't think any of us would argue, that anyone in our country or our world right now is not struggling. As the parent comment just mentioned with Ms. Phillips Morgan, we know that students, families, teachers, administrators, that we're all suffering emotionally, mentally. We all know that we would prefer to be back in buildings. That's never been a question. As a teacher, the things that feed my soul are those interactions in the hallways with students, sliding somebody a granola bar when they're having a bad day, hearing about a college decision. And I don't get those through a Zoom screen. I would love deeply to be back in buildings. But the fact remains that I cannot put my students at that kind of risk, and I can't put my community at that kind of risk, because that's where my family lives. So where I want to move to is that we're on the same side. We agree on these things. And something else that we can all agree on is that this pandemic is not going to last forever. Even today, one of the students in my 7th hour class broke the news to me that the United Kingdom has approved a vaccine. St. Louis County has freezers to store vaccine. An end is in sight. And I know parents and teachers and students that you are all holding on by the skin of your teeth, and we are too. But I'm asking that you hold on a little bit longer. And board members, I'm asking that you help us hold on a little bit longer and watch for those solutions. None of us, as Ms. Davey mentioned, none of us are public health professionals, but all of us are professional problem solvers. It is our job as teachers, and I'm speaking mostly to the parents here. It's our job as teachers to assess what students know and figure out how to bridge to where they need to be. This pandemic is not going to last forever. And if there are things that we need to do to support students to get back to that place, we will. That is one thing that I can guarantee you we know how to do. And to help sort of relieve that tension that we have, I just really want someone to sit here and tell you that your child is not going to fall behind. We know they're struggling. We know it's hard. It's hard for us too. But the best way that we're going to be able to get through that is with continued partnership with each other, recognizing that this is not perfect and this is not what any of us wanted. But recognizing that by continuing to reach out to each other, by continuing to call and speak to your child's individual teachers, by continuing to use our excellent PTOs, by continuing to communicate with each other one-on-one. And as they sit in front of you on YouTube or from a very long distance away, you know, I recognize that that's really what we have to do, is work with each other so that we can connect with what your students need individually. And I think really just where I want to leave is a thought that has helped me quite a bit as a teacher and as a human being trying to get through this. And that is really the question of where do I want to be and what do I want to be on the other side of this? And I'm hopeful because again, there's so much that we agree on. I'm hopeful that we can problem solve on the things that we have in front of us today. And we can continue to look and say, we know that we will have problems to solve in the future, but that we can tackle those together. And I hope that we can move our conversation to those solutions of how can we solve them together and how can we be the district that we want to be as all of us come through this. But thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody that came in and spoke. Thank you for your time and coming and speaking. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move into our reports. And we have our 2.01, which is my president's report. I would like to congratulate Ritenour High School senior Kevin Woods. His original song and video was accepted into the inaugural Hellbender Student Film Festival. The festival will be hosted on the campus of Lindenwood University in April of 2021. Kevin is a student in the KRHS Advanced Video Production course. He created the music video during the height of the pandemic shutdown to illustrate his feelings being restricted to his home. The mission of the festival is to highlight the best high school and college student film and video work for the state of Missouri. All submissions must be directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Congratulations to Kevin. Next, I'd like to remind Ritenour residents interested in filing candidacy for the Ritenour Board of Education election on April 6, 2021. You may register by beginning at 8 a.m. Tuesday, December 15th, 2020 at the Ritenour Administrative Center. Candidates' informational packets and filing guidelines will be available. Filing closes at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. 2 positions on the ballot will be on the ballot this year as the 3-year terms of current board members Lisa Glover-Jones and Orlando Lewis Jr. expire in April of 2021. Missouri law requires a person to be a U.S. citizen, at least 24 years of age, a resident taxpayer of the district, and to have resided in the state of Missouri for 1 year immediately preceding the election. With the exception of the first and last day, filing will not occur on legal or school holidays or on days the school district is closed due to inclement weather. The office will be closed from December 23rd, 2020 through January 3rd, 2021 for winter break. So the office will not be open during that time. That concludes my report. Moving on to 2.02, Dr. Kilbride, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Lona. So board members, Old Newsboys. So hopefully everybody got their copy of the Post-Dispatch Old Newsboys Day. We had 3 Ritenour High School students had their stories published in this edition of the Post-Dispatch, and one of those 3 students is sitting with us tonight. Their stories were featured in this November 19th edition. Normally, the papers are distributed through the region by volunteers to raise money for children's charities. Due to the pandemic, volunteers could not hand them out this year. Special edition was included as an insert in the regular newspaper. So congrats to Ritenour High seniors Faith Boyd, Chris Campos, and Kayla Ann Baker for having their articles published. Very proud of their accomplishments, and we thank the students for being great representatives of the Huskies here at Ritenour High School throughout the St. Louis region. If you'd like to read the articles, we've included the links in board docs as a part of this report. We'll start with Kayla's article, which has to do with Soulfisher Ministries. Kayla, do you care to speak a little bit about the article?
Sorry, I'm caught off guard. I gotta catch my breath. It was just a really great experience to be able to write it. The article itself is about an organization that aids incarcerated or previously incarcerated women. It's an amazing organization. It's a lot like the YWCA, and you guys should definitely consider reading about it. Not even necessarily my article, but just about the organization in general.
Congratulations, Kayla. Thank you. So in addition to Kayla, Faith Boyd had an article, Women in Charge, Building Women Up Through Education. And then Chris's article, Chris Campos, Cornerstone Center for Early Learning, Creative Exploration Builds Enthusiasm in Learners, builds enthusiastic learners. So congratulations to our Huskies for representing our student body well throughout the region. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Congratulations. All right. Moving on to 2.03, we have our MSBA NSBA report with Dr. Thomas.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Doug, can we roll film? This is that monthly film that we all get. The report from MSBA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of December. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the continuing impact of the coronavirus outbreak on Missouri's public schools. The latest surge of COVID-19 infections here in Missouri is making one of the most difficult school years ever even more challenging. While nearly all educators agree in-person learning is important to the success of most students, many school districts in the state have had to move to or stay with virtual instruction, at least for some grade levels. Health experts say most schools that have reopened in person with appropriate protocols have not had significant outbreaks within the school setting, and that most of the virus spread is occurring in the community, not in school. Nonetheless, the recent surge has caused more students to be learning virtually, mainly due to staffing issues and the severe shortage of substitute teachers. At a recent news conference announcing new quarantine guidance for Missouri schools, Commissioner of Education Margie Van Dieven said some students continue to struggle with virtual instruction.
Some students are doing quite well in this virtual environment, but others do not. And that's despite our teachers' best efforts. We're seeing our families struggle with significant amounts of stress as they try to keep up in a distance learning model of instruction. In particular, quarantine students may have difficulty interacting with their teachers to get the support they need, as many of those educators are also trying to teach their students still in person in their classrooms at the same time. Now, our teachers have been working tirelessly to meet the needs of all students wherever they are. But quite frankly, it's exhausting.
Educators and school board members throughout the state are also increasingly concerned about students who have become disconnected from school altogether as a result of remote learning. MSBA continues to update COVID-19 related resources available on our website. The 2021 regular session of the Missouri General Assembly convenes on January 6th with a legislature that is largely unchanged as a result of the November elections. Republicans retain solid majorities in both the House and Senate, while current Governor Mike Parson was elected to a 4-year term. MSBA Associate Executive Director for Advocacy, Mike Reed, tells us he expects some familiar issues to be discussed during the session, including voucher proposals and charter school expansion beyond St. Louis and Kansas City.
A number of people have been pushing for vouchers and some sort of tuition tax credits in light of what has happened with the coronavirus and schools not meeting online and meeting virtually. There has been ideas floated that because of the virtual education, parents should be able to receive some sort of payments to help for payment of outside people for tutoring or other situations. And I believe this is going to just be another outgrowth of that. And I think we'll see a big push for that this year.
Reed also says to expect an effort to establish virtual charter schools in Missouri.
If you're using public money, you should meet the same standards as other public schools. You call yourself a public school and you walk because you take public money, then you need to meet those same standards. That's where we are. We believe that we could go toe to toe with charter schools. Everybody should be on the same level playing field and everybody should meet the same standards. We believe that that's where it should go.
MSBA will strongly oppose any legislation designed to remove curriculum decisions related to virtual courses from the local school district, and will support legislation that increases accountability and oversight of charter schools. We'll be keeping you informed on developments during the legislative session through our weekly Legislative Voice newsletter, critical issue alerts, and immediate updates through Twitter. Information on legislative issues also can be found on MSBA's Action Center website. While most Missouri students have access to at least some school-based health services, there are significant gaps in providing those services to students in the state, according to a survey conducted by the Show Me School-Based Health Alliance of Missouri. The first ever Missouri-wide census of school-based health programs reveals 57% of Missouri students have access to at least one health service through their schools, but nearly 400,000 students do not have access to any services. The census shows significant gaps in health services for students in some Southeast, Southwest, and Northwest Missouri counties. Molly Ticknor is the executive director of the Show Me School-Based Health Alliance of Missouri, and she says health services available in the school setting can help keep students in school.
We have parents that have had to leave their jobs to go pick up their student if they're ill or if they have a mental health issue. And sometimes parents can't take off. Sometimes parents have jobs where they cannot leave. And so being able to consent for treatment from the school-based health provider and the parent to serve the immediate needs of that student and figure out what's going on and assess that and treat them on site, whereas potentially they would have had to go home or go to a hospital to get treated. So it really definitely reduces some barriers that our parents and our students face.
School-based health services can include mental behavioral support, physical health, primary care, oral care, and vision care. School-based health programs generally work in partnership with other healthcare providers, such as federally qualified health centers, nonprofit community-based organizations, hospitals, community mental health centers, and local health departments. Many school-based health programs also serve school district faculty and staff, along with families and community members. The Show Me School-Based Health Alliance of Missouri exists to improve the health of children and youth by advancing and advocating for school-based health care. The organization's goal is to ensure all children and adolescents are healthy so they can achieve at their fullest potential. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
So along with that, I want to point out some of the emails that we should be getting, because I hope everybody's getting the school board reports, the weekly report, the legislative forum webinar invitation. The Missouri School Board Legislative Voice, various webinars from both NSBA and MSBA are be coming out, and they do a very good job of keeping up with what's going on at the legislative level on the website. So if you ever want to see where our legislators are, you can go to MSBA and they have the information there. So it's going to be more and more important as we move forward. We have a president-elect now, and as a lot of people are saying, it'll be good to get back to a normal state on a national level. One more thing, I was thinking about this as it came up here. For those of you that get the Post-Dispatch in a hard copy, and I guess you can find it online as well, there was on the editorial page, a guy wrote an article. He's a PhD candidate and a teacher. He talked about why we should get back to the basics of supporting public education and finish the mirage of looking at charter schools as something else. And the solution is some are looking at it. And his basic thing was, it's resegregating our children in charter schools. It's for some that can and some that can't, because of transportation or whatever it is with the parents. And the last paragraph is resounding and saying we need to get back to the basics of supporting and helping the public education system to become the best that they can be. I invite everybody, if you take a few minutes and seek that out and read that. I think it's very telling about where we are and where we should be going. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas. Dr. Allen, I'll turn it over to you for your special school district report.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I had my Zoom meeting with my SSD compatriots on Monday evening. And so starting off from the first update, they started with the Parent Advisory Council. I have on here, if it's possible, to contact Becky Goebel to nominate someone to join. The great thing about the Parent Advisory Council is it improves communication between educators, administrators, and families. And currently Ritenour is still not represented. And so that would be great if we could kind of get someone to kind of start a Parent Advisory Council.
We all turned around and looked around.
And then we went on to, I noticed I have an extra 2 in there, fiscal year 21 revised budget. Dr. Jeff Haug talked about the expenditures were up $899,631 with a revenue down 2.8 million. They talked a little bit about what those expenditures were and how they also will contribute to our Ritenour community. Two of them I thought were very interesting were the News to You and Goal Book that are for unique learning and IEP supports and instructional strategies for the type of learning that we're doing right now, which is virtual. So helping our educators and parents so that you can have some more application for our children that do have IEPs. In North Tech, they're going to be having Chromebooks, and they're also having the addition of 2 buses. We also went through, and Dr. Molly Bolton kind of went through something that I thought was very interesting because they're also in the process of developing their definition of equity and also how they're going to be applying that and looking through the lens of equity in terms of their CSIP. So it's just very exciting knowing that we have our equity statement and knowing that SSD is also kind of in that same process. There are also 3 SSD school board positions that are going to be open. One is a 1-year term for District 4, which includes Ferguson, Florissant, and Pattonville. District 5 for Brentwood, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, Maplewood, Valley Park, and Munster Groves. And then as well as our district, District 6, Clayton, Normandy, Ritenour, and University City. The board positions, it's going to be opening up December the 15th and it closes March the 1st.
When does their board meet?
That's a good question.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So the governing council, so you met Monday night.
Yeah, we meet 4 times a year.
Yeah, so the SSD board meets monthly on
I would say.
They met this past Tuesday. So second Tuesday of the month.
So that concludes my report, unless you have any questions.
I have a question. Back on their budget where it has North Tech and Chromebooks. Do we supply Chromebooks for our SSD students or do they?
So it's both. Every child has a Chromebook. If it's assistive tech, maybe a Chromebook, maybe an iPad, maybe another device, that'd be provided by special school district. So the devices are a combination. So students, whether they be served by Ritenour teachers or SSD teachers, they're Ritenour kids,
right,
and they get the devices that they need to do the work.
Okay.
Why is their revenue down? Does it say? They used to have a huge budget when I was on there. They just passed one.
I can ask them why the revenues changed a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, that's surprising to me. That's a lot of money. Is that Molly Bolton? Is that our previous guy? I thought that was her.
Yes.
Yeah.
She worked at Wyland for a number of years.
She's awesome. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Alvin? All right. We will start going into our business items. Moving on to 3.01, we have our audit approval. And I'm looking for Mr. Lindhorst and Mr. Gokin. Did I say that right? Oh, good.
Good evening. As you know, the district is audited every year by independent public accounting firm and certified public accountants. So Derek Gokin from Daniel Jones and Associates is here to report to the board.
Thank you. As Mr. Lindhorst said, my name is Derek Gokin and I'm with Daniel Jones and Associates. And I'm just going to go through our audit real quick and share some of the opinions within the audit regarding the financial statements, state compliance testing, and federal compliance testing. For the district's financial statements, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective modified cash basis financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the remaining fund information of the district as of June 30th, 2020. And the respective changes in the modified cash basis financial position thereof for the year then ended in accordance with the modified cash basis of accounting described in note 1 of the report. This unmodified opinion is the highest opinion that the district can receive. And in other words, a clean audit there. For our state compliance testing, in our opinion, management's assertions that the Ritenour School District complied with the aforementioned requirements for the year ended June 30th, 2020 are fairly stated in all material respects. Again, the highest opinion possible. And it is the same for the federal awards, which because the district receives more than $750,000, we had to conduct a single audit. For that, the major programs we tested were Title I and the Educational Stabilization Fund, or the CARES Act money that the district received. And for the federal compliance, in our opinion, the district complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major federal programs for the year ended June 30th, 2020. So again, clean opinion there. I'd like to thank the board for being patient with us and letting us push this back to just the December board meeting. I know we normally try for November. This has been a difficult year for all of us, as we can imagine. This is normally a probably 3 to 4 week period, or 3 to 4 week project, including all communication back and forth. Once we, work with other districts at the same time, that obviously scatters things out. This year, it was probably an extra couple weeks that it took, along with all the other districts at the same time. So we look forward to hopefully getting back to a more normal schedule next year. I'd also like to thank Mr. Lindhorst, Ms. Pearson especially, and everyone else in the business and finance department. They were extremely helpful, extremely organized. This is certainly one of the easier audits that I work on, and definitely grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Anybody have any questions at the moment?
Madam President, I move that we accept the 2020 financial audit conducted by Daniel Jones and Associates as presented tonight to the board.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any other questions? I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Garden? I don't have a response. Okay. No response, and I will vote yes.
Technically, it's not an over.
I know, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. You're all right. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Dr. LaChance, we're going to move on to 3.02. We have our academic calendar and Mr. Eaton. Oh, she said yes.
Okay. There's a big lag time.
Yeah,
There is a lag. I know that.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Mr. Eaton for joining me again this evening to present the academic calendar for the 2021-22 school year. I want to point out that we do believe that academic calendar work does fit with our equity statement, and I'll just highlight a few comments. We see the calendar as a resource, the time as a resource allocated in a way that every student gets what they need. That was our goal in developing the calendar. We also believe in investment, engage every student in their learning by supporting student and teacher efficacy, and that was a big part of our conversation as well as a committee. We strive to meet our vision and mission through all the work that's done day in and day out on any given calendar year. I just want to point out that our work was aligned with House Bill 161 that mandates a school district may start no earlier than 14 calendar days prior to the first Monday of September, which would be August 23rd, 2021 is the earliest possible start date for next school year because Labor Day is Monday, September 6th. We also work to maintain a calendar in alignment with state guidelines, which calls for at least 1,044 student hours, and our teacher agreement calls for 181 teacher work days. Our calendar actually has 1,097 hours in 171 days. We worked hard to focus on student learning and keep the focus on our students throughout the process. Want to point out the support of the parents that joined us in the committee and representing all levels of the district, as well as the teachers that joined us. And many of the teachers, as you can see, also have children in the district, supporting their school decisions as well as decisions for their children. As I mentioned before, our timeline is 171 days, consistent with last school year, as well as the time, and 181 teacher work days, also consistent with last school year. The committee worked hard. I just wanted to show the last 4 years of changes, but also some consistencies. We're fairly consistent with last year, but the committee worked hard to try to balance out the quarters as best we could, and had quite a bit of conversation about that. And Mr. Eaton, if you'd like to share any thoughts about the work that we've done as a committee.
Trying to make sure that we kept everything as equal as possible when it came to quarters and semester, trying not to push too much on the students at the first quarter by shortening it to try to keep with a ending before Christmas break. It just, for somebody who served on the committee for a couple of years now, this was probably the hardest calendar committee to serve on trying to readjust those and meet everybody's requests, and doing what we thought, and when we present it, we feel that this is the most fairest example for the students.
So you'll see that our recommendations in the calendar in board docs represents the beginning of the school year on Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. Fall conferences during the first week in October, 5th through the 8th. Professional Development Day on November 2nd, 2021, to stay consistent on Election Day, Professional Development Day scheduling. Winter break occurring from December 22nd through January 4th. Teachers would return on Tuesday, January 4th, and students on Wednesday, January 5th. And then maintaining the end of first semester and final exams in January, which would be January 13th and 14th next school year, 2022. We also agreed we'd revisit this in the following years as we get more information and more data. And we're hoping that additional time for students to study at the high school will yield better results for our students. Looking at second semester, third quarter Professional Development Day on February 18th. Spring conferences, March 14th through the 16th and the 18th. And spring break aligned with special school district. It will be, was a priority of the committee, and we intend to continue to do so in future years. Believe that is a win-win for our students and our parents.
Please explain that again, just so people watching why we're doing that.
Sure. We recognize that we have families in the district that have children that attend Ritenour School District schools, as well as special school district schools, and wanted to make sure that their families had an aligned spring break if they were intending to travel or just spend time together. We also know that our high school students who attend tech school, they do not get if our spring breaks do not align, they're expected to attend school at the tech school when they're on spring break here in Ritenour. And we know that impacts their attendance at tech school. So we want to value their commitment to the tech skills they're trying to learn and really align that for them as well.
Thank you.
Fourth quarter Professional Development Day on Friday, the 15th of April. Ritenour High School finals on May 25th and 26th. Last day for students would be the 26th of May, and the teacher workday on May 27th. Mr. Eaton, if you've had any other comments you'd like to share.
We did a lot of conversation back and forth, and I know moving the conferences to the October dates is a little different than the last couple of years. But with starting school a little bit later, we felt like we were just having open houses and then going right into conferences, and we wanted that little bit of time. We know elementary and middle school use it more for goals. goal conferences, but we wanted to give that a little bit of an opportunity to get some kind of information as parents that we could come and hear something and go from there. So that's part of the reason why we pushed to have that move to October.
We're open to any comments or questions you may have, and we're asking for your approval of the 2021-22 school year based on the committee recommendations.
Did we work in any snow days or anything, or did we eliminate those as well?
Good question. We did eliminate the snow days based on the district AMI plan, so that our intention is to learn virtually now that we're a one-to-one district and students have access to devices at all levels. That's our goal. The state currently allows for 6 days to be virtual, so there is a caveat on the calendar that gives the board some latitude if by chance we had the circumstance that it prohibited that. But I also think the state is still in some conversation about that guideline moving forward. I think they're going to be more flexible than not.
So what that means, Dr. Thomas, is if we would have beyond 6 inclement weather days, then it would be a situation where the board may have to act in line before May 1st to adjust the calendar. At 1,097 hours, we're above and beyond the required 1,044, so we've got some flexibility. So if we have beyond 6 inclement weather days, and if the board wants to remain committed to that May 26th day, then the board would need to reconvene and approve and finalize, adjust the calendar for those days that would be above and beyond the 6.
It's just really good to see that the calendar starts according to state law and everything, and then we can finish still early enough in May that we're before the holiday in May, that we usually went over and beyond and into June. So this is a good change to shrink the calendar. It's been a conversation with everyone to compact the calendar a little bit and shorten the school year so that the faculty and students get some needed rest for their summer vacation and whatnot. I think that's a good way of getting that set up and eliminate those 6 days. And since every student here now can't work virtually on those cold wintry days where they would go out sledding. I think it'll show promise that we can keep our focus all the way to the end of the school year, which is well in May, and give them the time off they will richly deserve. But I thank you guys for all the hard work. It's good to hear that we're aligning ourselves with SSD, and that is very important there, and to support our kids. I know we have 12-13% of our students being serviced by SSD, and it's good that we recognize that partnership all the way to our calendar. So thank you, and thank your calendar committee for all their hard work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Move to accept the 2021-2022 academic calendar as presented tonight.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other questions? I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Garden? We have a little lag. I'll vote yes. And when her vote comes in, I'll let you know. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eaton.
Moving on to 3.03, we have our Kratz Elementary School repair approval with Mr. Lindhorst.
Good evening again. As we discussed last week, we had water intrusion at Kratz Elementary about a month and a half ago now. And we believe the water is building up around the building and flowing between the foundation wall and the structural wall. And that's caused because of blocked drains and also the ground and a concrete apron that were originally sloped away from the building to take the water away from it. After 67 years, now significantly slopes towards the building. So the next steps are to excavate the area at least 6 feet down where the pipes should be located that transport stormwater away from the building and down the hill. After the pipes are exposed, we anticipate needing to replace some or all of those pipes. And then after the replacements are made, the ground and a new concrete apron will be properly sloped away from the building, and we will double the amount of drains on both sides of the doorway and the flagpole to help prevent recurrence of the water intrusion. So Wachter Construction is working on several projects for us now. We asked them for an estimate. This is a repair and not required to bid. And also we would have a hard time obtaining bids because we really don't know what the work is. We don't know what the scope is until they dig up and see what those pipes look like. So their estimate and a not to exceed cost for all of the work is $117,047. That's if all of the expected drains and pipes need to be replaced. And it could be less if we find things that if things are better than we expect. And if there's something completely unexpected, we would try to be fair with the contractor and adjust that cost. But the not to exceed cost does protect the district as long as everything we expect is down there. So I would recommend that the board approve the work for Wachter Construction in the amount of $117,047. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I agree with the recommendation that Wachter has done good work with us, and not to exceed is the way to go for something like this.
Thank you.
I recommend the board approve the contract with Wachter Construction for not to exceed cost of $117,047.
A motion and a second. Any other questions?
Just to say that it's a good choice to go with Wachter because they've, over the years, they've been just rock solid for us. They given us good prices and got things done in a very expedient and professional manner. I mean, they're one of the few that we can really count on.
Yes, they're a very good contractor.
I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Absolutely.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco? Yes. Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. And Penny DeGarden? And I'll let you know when her vote comes in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our 3.04, which is our enrollment and class size report with Dr. Lachines. And Ms. Hahn.
That's right.
So we're going to tag team with this, and it's a report that Mike and I, or Ken and I used to do, and now Mike and I do a report together, which is nice because we've done so many reports over the years together, we don't even need to practice anymore. So thinking about our Ritenour School District vision, when we think about this and how it relates to this report, obviously we want to look at the number of students that we have in the district and the different demographics of our students. So that is something that we'll show as we go through the report. Thinking about the mission, do we have teachers in the classrooms that are able to work through the mission with our students, and our class size is limited to make this happen? With the equity statement, students will see themselves, their culture represented throughout the building and district. So some of the numbers that you're going to see with the enrollment report, there's something called the October count, which actually takes place in September, which is the last Wednesday in September. And this is an important number because this is what the state looks at when we get our initial numbers. So we'll look at the October count, And there's also a February count, which we haven't done yet, obviously, which is the last Wednesday in January. So the state looks at these numbers to see what changes take place from September through January with enrollment and demographics. You'll also see some numbers in here that are current numbers, which were pulled in November. So this is an interesting graph looking at our demographics from 1991, which, you know, I was thinking when I did that, oh, that seems like such a long time ago, which it is. And it was actually my first year in Ritenour School District. But you can see how much the demographics have changed in the district over the years. 2014-15 was where we really started to see a drop with the white student population, which is now pretty much equal to the Hispanic population in the school district. The multiracial group was one where you look at certain numbers of students, how many fit into that particular subgroup. So Ritenour started having an increase in our multiracial students, which is now considered one of our subgroups. So the rest of the population, obviously, which would make up the rest are our Asian students and others, which makes up close to 2% of our population. This is to look at how we compare to the state. This is a comparison of last year's number. The state does not put out yet the numbers for this year, but you can see that, you know, the only areas that we are lower in are our Asian and white populations compared to the state. Another look at the district enrollment, which you can see from 1991 to 2020 has seen a significant decrease in our enrollment. This year's numbers are very low. We anticipated them being lower because of COVID, but I think we were somewhat surprised by where they are now. So again, this is another look at that over the past 10 years. Last year at this time, we were at 6,559 when we pulled that count for the October count. Looking at our buildings, this is where they were at the October count, again, which was in September, so they have changed a little bit since then. And you can see that our elementaries have quite a bit of a range in them, with Booter being the smallest at 399. And then we have Marvin at the highest with 536. Our middle schools continue to take up that load of students that we saw increasing from previous years. So they are pretty high. And then our high school includes alternative education as well as any students that attend the IWC. So again, there haven't been many changes. The one thing that we did notice is students at the middle school at this point, when we pulled the numbers that we're looking at the RVA for middle, we did not do that yet when these numbers came out for elementary. But we do know that we had 428 students that chose RVA at the middle school program initially. So that did reduce those numbers in the schools if you look at it by just particular numbers. School for Early Childhood Education, they are at 98, and that is going full in phase 1. So those numbers are lower, but we expected them to be lower to help with the spaces within the building. Looking at the grade level enrollment, kindergarten is where we saw our biggest drop from last year. We're down about 131 students from the previous year. And we also saw a drop in 4th grade, where we went from 540 to 454 students. The one area, though, too, that we saw an increase is in the 9th grade level. And you can see that there, we went from 441 to 515. So really at that kindergarten, 1st grade levels where we saw quite a bit of changes, the elementary more so than the middle and high. So again, this is another look at kindergarten enrollment. You can see where we had a high at 543 in 2015-16, and then our low of 401 this year. That's going to bring some interesting changes for us and some planning for next school year. How does that look in 1st grade? And also what do we need to do for really recruiting kindergarten students for next school year? This is an increase for us too. Families do not have to report if they are attending homeschool, but we do ask them to fill out a form if they're taking their child out of the district. So this year we have 36 students that have filled out the forms, but there are probably a lot of others that have not filled out the form, but by law they do not have to, but we know of 36 students that chose to homeschool this school year. Thinking about and looking at our ELL enrollment, this is something we need to continually look at because it does increase. And last year we increased a teacher at Marion Elementary. You can see they were at 114 last year students, but this year they're at 98, which is still very high. We're going to need to look at our secondary schools as well as some more of our elementary down the road and something for us to plan with staffing because these numbers are still pretty high for caseloads. Looking at languages in Ritenour, again, our languages have remained pretty much the same, but we do have a lot of different languages in the school district that people put on the forms. So there are a lot of languages that aren't here or that we haven't identified. We have well over 25 languages spoken within the school district. There are a lot of different dialects, but these are the 25 languages that we have recorded. We have 193 immigrant students. Those are students who have been in the country less than a year. McKinney-Vento is the federal law for students in transition and families in transition, as well as unaccompanied youth. Our numbers are lower at this point. This is to date. And that's probably because we're not in school and we don't have an idea where a lot of the families are living. Our wellness teams have done a great job of trying to find where families are. But this number I'm anticipating once we come back will be even higher. Another area here where we have seen an increase are our number of unaccompanied youth. Those are the students that may be on their own. Maybe they might have had to leave the home for a particular reason. It could also be a student who possibly has parents who might be incarcerated or they have been abandoned and they're just living with a grandparent or someone else. This year we saw, we went from 14 last year to 31 students right now who are considered unaccompanied youth. Right now we are at 58 students in foster care. So this will be something that changes throughout the year because oftentimes at semester we'll do a meeting to determine whether or not students will go to a new school district or choose to remain in the Ritenour School District. So again, this is just an overall picture of where we compare, and it's last year's numbers to the state of Missouri. LEP, that is limited English proficiency, and these are percentages. You can see that our EL numbers are much higher than the state average. Same thing when we talked about last month about special education, we're higher. Homeless, foster about the same, and our gifted is slightly higher. So in summary, with the enrollment, we saw enrollment in the district and elementary buildings decreased. We saw the largest decrease in kindergarten and fourth, largest increase in ninth grade. The elementary ranges, which is something for us to look at, the big differences we have in the numbers in the schools. Our EL enrollment continues to increase. We can always say we have one of the most diverse school districts in the state. And the parents opting for homeschool has increased within the district.
I'm going to share our class size information for the school district and just point out that that's a human resource objective to ensure that learning occurs in supportive environments, but also that 100% of the staff serving our students are considered highly qualified, and to ensure that class sizes adhere to Missouri School Improvement Standards, or MSIP, also known as MSIP guidelines. So those guidelines, just to share with the board, have a desirable standard set by Missouri School Improvement, but also a standard that must be met in terms of the largest acceptable class size. When it gets beyond that, we begin to look at additional supports needed for that classroom, or in some cases consider additional staffing needs as those come up. I also want to point out that physical education and performing arts classes do allow for larger enrollment. And the state has allowed school districts to assign their own standard for virtual academy or virtual instruction. We've set that at a class size of 30 as a district.
So Mike, are these our numbers or are these in this chart, the last chart?
Oh, the last chart? The last chart, those are the state's numbers of where they set the guidelines of what they would consider a class size that's at a desirable level, and then a class size that is at meeting the standard. And then anything exceeding the standard really is a call to us to consider what supports are needed for that classroom. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah.
When we look across the board, 57% of all of our classes at the elementary level meet that desirable standard, which is a lower class size number set by the state. So 57%, and that's an increase of 14% from last school year. And that somewhat fits with Ms. Hahn's data that she shared. As the enrollment dropped, that allowed class sizes also to drop. Looking at the middle school, 66% of classes at Hake Middle met that desirable state. That's just a drop of 3% compared to the year before. Ritenour Middle School, 74% of all classes met that desirable standard, and we'll get a little more into this data in the next few slides. That's an increase of 12% more of the classes are meeting that desirable standard. And looking at the RVA, the Ritenour Virtual Academy, at the middle school, 90% of all of those classes meet the desirable standard, not just the Ritenour standard that we set, but that desirable standard for class size. And at the high school level, Ms. Hahn shared that there was an increase in 9th grade enrollment. Even with that increase, we're at 80% of all of our classes are meeting that desirable standard, which is just a decline of 2% compared to last school year. Looking a little closer at our elementary schools, you can see that Booter, 69% of the Booter classrooms meet that desirable standard. 89%, nearly 90% of the Iveland classrooms are at the desirable. And again, that desirable standard is a lower class size standard. 67% of Kratz, 56% of Marion classrooms are at the desirable level. 52% at Marvin. 95% of Weiland classrooms are at the desirable level. And then looking at RVA for K, really just kindergarten through 3rd grade, we have 30 sections and 24 meet the standard. This data was pulled on the 20th of November, and at that point, 6 classrooms exceeded the standard, but was still only one of those classrooms was above 30. And it was set at 31. I looked at the data again yesterday, and of those 6, because school principals and student support teams have been working, if there are concerns, there are times where they've moved students back to the classroom or worked with families based on their needs. And now there are only 4 of those classrooms exceed the limit. Really, it's the standard, exceed the standard, and of those, only 1 exceeds that class size of 30, and they're set at 31. And that specific classroom, adjustments are being made to not only support those students, but also make adjustments moving into 2nd semester for that classroom.
Board members, part of the thinking around larger classes and virtual was to keep in-person class sizes as small as possible in phase 2.
Absolutely, and that actually allowed us to do that. As a teacher shared earlier, having 7 to 9 students in our classroom, having the larger class sizes for virtual allowed us to do that. And I don't have a lot of data of what the other districts around the region said their virtual class sizes at. I only know for my own daughter, I think her smallest class size is 42. in a virtual setting in other districts. So other districts also sought that same approach.
So are we sacrificing that quality in our virtual classroom for our classroom?
I don't think we are, because we did, principals shared that in some cases, those class sizes are higher because the teacher advocated to keep the students in their class, when we could have spread the numbers out and we could have spread the students in the virtual academy across the building or across the district. In almost every one of those cases, those 6 that are represented there, the teacher advocated, I know these students, I want to keep these students. And then we followed up with available staff members and offered them additional assistance to support those virtual classrooms. So there's a few classes at Weiland, and I know that Mr. Adams, he routinely supports those classrooms and goes in and provides support in terms of smaller group sizes to support those larger RVA sections. So we worked hard to adjust for that with the staff we had available. And we look to even make additional adjustments going into second semester based on parent selections.
And those additional staff members, Mike, were early childhood educators that have pushed into the elementary schools as one source, and then also long-term subs was another source.
Correct. We had long-term subs, the early childhood teachers assistants, as well as we had 2 additional teachers at the early childhood center that were able to support those classrooms. And in many cases, our refocus room teachers aides do have some availability to support those classrooms as well. So, looking at Ritenour High School core classes, 89% of English language arts classrooms meet the desirable standard. 92% of our math courses at the high school meet that desirable standard. 93% of science and 86% of social studies classrooms at Ritenour High School. Looking at our elective courses, 50% of art, 74% of the business, career, and tech ed program, 43% of drama, 100% of our EL classrooms. Family and consumer science, we did have 1 class that exceeded the limit, and we've checked in with the teacher and ensured that if she needed additional supports, she actually has reported that oddly that class is doing well and actually has a fairly high success rate, but we are looking to make sure that the class does not have numbers that exceed the limit next semester. 82% of media convergence. And then again, music and PE allow for a class size to exceed the limit and go as high as 45 for PE, and can be larger in music depending upon the course. And those exceeding numbers just represent those classes that exceed that smaller limit. And then 78% of world languages. So all total came to 80% of Ritenour High School courses. Looking at Hake Middle School, again, the core content classes, 41% of ELA classrooms meet that desirable standard, 48% of math courses, 32% of science, and the one science course that exceeds is a 6th grade course that, again, Ms. Nilgis has checked on repeatedly, and there are efforts to make adjustments, but there are supports and check-ins on that classroom as well. And then social studies, 64%. Looking at the electives for Hake Middle, you can see a large percentage of the elective courses, 100% of the courses meet the desirable standard. And I should have pointed out that at our middle school and high school, as you know, it's been virtual up to this point throughout the school year. 88% of physical education and health, 100% of our technology and Project Lead the Way, and 33% of world languages. Again, that's only a decline of a 3% decline from the previous year. Ritenour Middle School core content looks very similar, 45, 50, 55%, and ranging social studies up to 57% of the courses meet that desirable standard. Overall, again, the elective courses, 100% in many cases meeting that desirable standard at the middle school level. And overall at Ritenour Middle this year, an increase of 10% of the coursework is at, compared to the year before, at that desirable level. I did look at the RVA coursework at the middle school level, the Ritenour Virtual Academy, and these numbers actually look better than the non-RVA. And remember, they've all been virtual this semester. These are families that chose virtually at the beginning of the school year, and the principals worked to create virtual sections for those families, and the teachers were assigned accordingly. So 90% of that core content courses are at that desirable level. And then those students do participate in the non-core classrooms, those electives. They participate in the electives that I shared on the other pages at Hagen and Ritenour Middle. In summary, 99% of elementary classes and secondary core classes meet the state standard. 99% of all classes meet the state standard, so not just core, but all classes. And then 75% of all of our classes meet the state desirable standard. This is fairly consistent year over year for what we represent, what we've done in Ritenour. And then again, we continue to monitor class sizes, respond to teachers' needs, provide additional support, and then at times look at staffing, additional staffing if needed throughout the school year. I'm open to any questions you may have about our class sizes.
Not really about the class sizes, but are we still enrolling people kind of consistently?
I'll say that, and I haven't done this report with Julie prior, but this was challenging because numbers were changing pretty frequently. So we put off pulling numbers till as late as possible for the report, and then began looking at them again, and they're, you know.
So consistently enrolling new students. Julie, can you talk a little bit about what there's usually a cluster at the start of second semester. When does that usually start to pick up?
So that'll start right after winter break. We'll see that probably for a month where new families will start to come in. And we'll get a lot of them, but we'll also get quite a few that leave as well. So our hope is that a lot of families choose to come back second semester that may have not chosen first semester, but that is one of our busiest times. It's right in the first part of January through the end of January.
So is all this information based on the October report?
Some were October and some were like yesterday's number for enrollment was at 6,185. So it's still pretty close. The numbers haven't changed too much.
And the class size numbers were pulled on November 20th. And then I just double checked some of those exceeding coursework this past yesterday to see where they're at. So
on the ELL enrollment, really we're down even though the number I looked from 19 to 20. And that's what we have, right? We don't have 21 and stuff. Yes.
No, that's 21.
ELL.
That's for this year.
Okay, because it's all down except for I think Wyland is the only one that did.
The number's not right.
Yeah, the number can't be right. 1,000 low, because the only one that increased from 2019 is Wyland.
So what I probably did not put on there are some of the monitored students. So they also get services, but they're considered what we call MY1, MY2. They're not actually receiving services. So, but we still have to maintain their documentation. So I'll follow up on that.
I have a quick question about the language on slide 20. When it says gifted, is that about our Project Challenge students or is that?
Correct.
Yes.
We do not include students at the high school level in those numbers who are taking advanced classes or who might have been in Project Challenge prior to high school.
Oh.
Any other questions?
All I have.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 3.06. We have our second reading and adoption of policy IGAEB, the school health.
We have 3.05.
Did I skip? Oh, I'm so sorry. I did skip 3.05. So sorry. The St. Anne PD SRO agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Lona. So board members, you're familiar with this agreement. This was some work that we did over the course of the summer. And you approved this agreement with the city of St. Anne around terms for our SRO officers that serve Ritenour High School as well as Hague Middle School. So I'm going to take you back a little bit to the business meeting in August. It was actually August 13th, I believe, when this was approved. So after your approval of the agreement, the next day I signed off on the agreement and delivered it to St. Anne. And a couple of days after that, so into that next week, I received information from Chief Jimenez that due to some changes in policy for their accrediting agency, they're accredited by CALIA, which is a national accreditation group for police departments. They were unable to sign off on the agreement as is, and it had to do with item number 9, specifically restricting holds that officers could use in the line of duty. So based on the fact that number 9, that language was in there, that was the one obstacle that stood in the way of the city of St. Anne being able to sign off on the agreement. So had a number of conversations, and that included speaking with the student leadership group at the high school. I spoke with the Game Changers and shared this information. And what is clear in number 9 is that the concern from the part of students and the concern that I heard from the Board of Education was around the fear and the potential for any current student to be restrained in this fashion by any member of the SRO team. So after talking with the Game Changers, modified the language in number 9, and I'll read it aloud so everybody's clear. There's no other changes anywhere else in the document. In number 9, Ritenour School District will be revising our existing restraint policy, it's JGA, to be in line with best practice. To that end, the use of any chokehold defined as a physical maneuver that restricts an individual's ability to breathe for the purposes of incapacitation on any Ritenour student, any current Ritenour student, is prohibited. That satisfied the student leadership group, that gets the student's voice in the room. That was acceptable to the city of St. Anne because their policy requires them to take all necessary steps if life is in danger to eliminate the threat. That allows them to protect the current student body and staff from threats outside the building. And it also allows our student body, based on student voice at the high school, to feel safe should the board choose to approve this amended agreement. So that's what I'd asked the board to approve tonight. You've already approved this agreement. That was not acceptable to the city of St. Anne for the reasons I just shared. Modified the agreement, would ask for your approval of this modified agreement. And if the board doesn't approve it tonight, that would allow us to follow through with the other pieces of the plan, which does include anti-bias, anti-racism training, which is in number 8. That's been on hold because this agreement hasn't been enacted yet. So would ask for your approval of this amended agreement.
I'd like to move to approve the revised St. Anne Police Department SRO agreement as presented.
Second.
The motion and a second. Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I'd like to change.
Thank you.
What
Dr.
did he say?
Alvin?
I couldn't hear what he said.
He said yes, he likes the change that was made.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Dr. Alvin? Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
I will vote yes. And Ms. DeGarda? I will let you know when her vote comes through. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead now and move on to the second reading and adoption.
So board members, I come back to you this month for the second reading of policy IGAEB around sexual health instruction. The district will provide instruction regarding sexual abuse as required by law.
All instruction will be appropriate to the age of the students receiving the instruction. Students may be separated by gender for the instruction. Board members, there is notice and there is also the option to opt out. We've gone through in the first reading the 11 components of the policy. And if you recall, item number 7, there were questions that were that arose around number 7, specifically the laws pertaining to financial responsibility to students born in and out of wedlock. We followed up based on those questions with our attorney as well as MSBA and confirmed that as a part of the items not waived checklist that we do need to adopt this policy in whole, not just in part, as a part of the DESE items not waived checklist. So in addition, around sexual abuse, which is towards the end of the policy, in accordance with law, the district will provide trauma-informed, developmentally appropriate training to students in grades 6 to 12 regarding sexual abuse, including but not limited to instruction on how to recognize, how to report, how to obtain assistance and intervention, and resources that are available for students impacted by sexual abuse. So should the board approve the second reading, which then would lead to approval of this policy, we would set out about creating a regulation to go along with this that would more clearly define how this policy would be implemented in the classrooms in the district, with the concern around potential bias that was raised around number 7.
I move we approve the second reading and adoption of policy IGAEB, school health instruction as presented.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions?
No questions, just a comment. I do appreciate going back and looking at the policy and being more intentional surrounding the regulations and how it's going to be implemented so that we don't have a lens of bias in implementing some of these strategies, especially since it ties back to the items not waiving financial responsibilities. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Albin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Garden? I'll let you know when her vote comes through, and I will vote yes. Before we move on, may I ask a question? Mr. Garden, in regards to the SRO agreement, she did send it through with a question. In the middle of a situation, how will the officer determine if a student is enrolled?
So that was the conversation with the game changers. So the question was, in the middle of a situation where people are escalated, it's always decisions that are made in the spur of the moment. The conversation with the game changers was that based on the relationships and the visibility that our SROs have with current students, there was a belief that the SROs know who the current students are. And that's really recognition is the #1 factor. But we also shared that there is no 100% guarantee. You know, that the #1 role of officers is to do the best they can to keep students and staff safe. And when you're in a life-threatening situation, people have to act quickly. So that's something that the game changer group was asking for, is how can you guarantee? And the unfortunate reality is there are no guarantees.
Did she vote?
She voted yes on both of those.
On both of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to personnel recommendations, we have Dr. LaChance.
Board members, I'm here to present items 1 through 22 of personnel recommendations. I'm open to any comments or questions you may have.
What's the difference between number 20 and 21? One says shared and one says full.
So that goes back to the conversations around when those positions were created. There were 3 additional supervisor positions that were created. Those 3 positions could be broken up in pieces and parts because the thinking of the department was there were multiple people that were looking in getting experience in that work in the department. So there's 3 full positions. Some people are getting a full position. Another position might be broken into 2 parts that would allow them to go beyond 3 people. And it's different by season. So number 20 during the fall season would be interested in that, during the winter season would be interested in that work, but that person's coaching duties in the fall would prevent that person from doing it.
So explain to me then, what does that position do?
So when we talked about this, when those positions were created, when that department was reorganized, so the staff, the administrators in that department oversee these people that play a role for the events. So in the winter season, when we do have the events, these people are on the front lines meeting with officials. These people are on the front lines addressing issues that come up, and then they report directly to the administrators in that department.
So is it that we only have one of these, 1 out of 3?
I don't recall if we filled all 3 of those positions, Mike.
At this point, this was all that was seen as needed moving into the winter season, knowing we're going to have an abbreviated season. So this is all the recommendation at this point.
That was my only question. Thank you.
Will we accept positions 1 through 22 as presented?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any other questions? I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Garden? I'll let you know when she responds. And I will vote yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 3.08, we have board member comments. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? I do, but I'll wait.
Just following up on what Brad was saying about the article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. For those who are not aware, there's also a study that's been released from Forward to Ferguson. It's called Still Separate, Still Unequal, a call to level the uneven educational playing field in St. Louis. And as many of us know, how the funding formula is here in the Missouri area is based upon your taxes and housing and all that. So this study talks about that and how we can make changes to that process. And they're looking for voices from people who have experience, educational advocates, families, parents. So I'll send this out to the board, just a link to the article and to the results of the study. It's a pretty big document, it's like 76 pages, but it gives stats for the Missouri area, specifically St. Louis, and then just kind of talking about the history of educational funding within St. Louis. So kind of piggybacking off of that.
We're just saying anything about our implement.
So that was what I was going to speak about. If you all check your messages, you should have received a message from Dr. Kilbride with a letter that we are going to send over to Overland. And if you could review that and provide any feedback, I'd appreciate it. We'd like to get it out to them as soon as possible. And then also, I would like to speak at one of their meetings, but after this meeting, I'm in my shopping for the next thing I'm going to tell you about. I'm quarantining myself, so I will not be attending until after the first of the year. So if you'd like to join me, I will let you know when I will be going to that.
Yes.
Thank you. So the other thing, the fun thing that I was going to tell you about is I am doing the 'Twas a Night Before Christmas in the Ritenour School District again. We have 150 students that we are supporting, that I've worked with the counselors, thanks to Julie Hahn and her team. And a little bit different this year. I'm not having the big get together where everybody comes stuffs the bags, but if you'd like to make any donations, it is on December 17th. I will accept drop-offs at the door. I'm sorry, this is the other part of me quarantining myself from everybody. But I will accept drop-offs at the door, and then we're gonna bring them in, and me and my husband and my 2 kids, the people that I can be around, are gonna stuff the bags and then deliver them the next day to the students. So I had put it out, we're just looking for hats and gloves and toys, so anything that you're willing to donate. And I do appreciate it. I've gotten several people that have sent me some money and just asked me to do all the shopping for them, and I'm happy to do that also. So anyway, thank you. I don't even know how many years I've been doing this. Somebody asked me that the other day, and I'm like, I don't know. So I'll have to go back and look at it. So anyway, I thank you all for your continued support. And that's all I have.
When do you want this stuff by?
Next Thursday, but I'm also willing, if you want me to come pick anything up, I can come pick it up at your house. You can drop it at my house, but it's at the New Horizons Presbyterian Church, Thursday at 6 o'clock is when I'm doing donations, like delivery or whatever. And it's in the back. So it's like when you come into the church, it's in the back entrance in the basement.
Do you accept used toys by any chance? Like,
so I do not.
That's okay.
But I do accept used and in good condition books.
I have
So
those.
each package comes with like a toy and a book and gloves, hats, hot cocoa. I've had hot cocoa donated and popcorn and things like that.
Okay.
Okay, all right. That's all I got there.
Do we know, Chris, about the level of donations and the support for the Ritenour Co-Care Pantry?
Yeah, so board members, the question about the level of support for the Co-Care Pantry. Happy to report last night the Pride and Promise Foundation made a significant donation to the Ritenour Co-Care Food Pantry. So if you remember going back into the spring, the Pride and Promise Foundation made a commitment to outfitting buses with Wi-Fi that would allow us to make 12 of our buses hot to put out in the community, put in school parking lots to expand access. Then there were grants that came forth using CARES Act funds, and that backfilled a lot of the funding that the foundation put forth to make that happen. So at our foundation meeting last night, we refunded the foundation $2,550 of their $5,100 donation to outfit our buses with Wi-Fi. The foundation moved to donate that $2,550 to the Co-Care Food Pantry. And then that motion was amended by a member of the foundation board to nearly double that, up to $5,000. And so the foundation board voted last night to make a $5,000 donation to the food pantry. Because the food pantry right now, with not having the district food drive, as we've had every year since 1981, right, with not having the food drive this year, the food drive, we net anywhere between 15 and 18,000 canned food items. That sustains the pantry for 6 months. Without having any of that, the food pantry has been having to put out significant sums of money to purchase canned food items. And with Dwight being on the board and being the treasurer of the co-care pantry, he's been invaluable in that work, and he can speak in detail. I think recently there was $7,000 or $8,000 that the co-care had to commit to purchasing canned goods. So this donation from the foundation last night will, take care of about 70% of what the pantry just had to put out to meet the need. The pantry, their daily visits are up. Dwight shared some data the other day, averaging about 71 visits per day to the pantry. So definitely filling a need in the community. And also happy to share that with Michael Smith and Dwight and Doug Gray and Julie Hahn, we met with Jasmine Burris and Keisha Lee from Care STL at the Husky Support Center the other day to do a walkthrough to talk about expansion of the Husky Health Center in the Husky Support Center, and some very exciting visioning conversations to come, which would include expanding the health center to not just serve Ritenour students, but to serve the entire Ritenour community. So even if you don't have children in the district, now that we have a space that's separate from all of our schools, community could come in there, would not be a disruption to learning, because there's no learning that goes on at the Husky Support Center. So great conversations and a lot of excitement.
You talk about the health center and yet we're doing the right thing with these things. We know that. And it's good when I turn on the news at night that you see something on there that says, studies have told us that having community health systems, health care place, that parents can take their child immediately is helping this kid out of school as well as in school. It's helping the families and things like that. And they had a brief article about that on the news the other night, talking about kids get immediate care so that they're not out of school, so they're not seeing someone 20 miles away or something like this. It's right there in their neighborhood. It's right there in their school district. And they're saying how much of a plus it was. And you just see that, you say, yeah, we know that. And it's good to know that the rest of the world is finally catching up to what we already know.
Yeah, to echo your sentiments, Dr. Thomas, too. So that idea of educating the whole child, we have to provide wraparound services for students, because not only do we have the responsibility of educating every child at high levels in the classroom, we also have to meet basic needs. So whether they be food insecurity needs, whether it be healthcare needs, potentially whether it be housing needs, perhaps down the road. Students can't learn at high levels if they're hungry, if they're sick, or if they're not aware, if they're not aware of where they're going to lay their head. And as Julie and Mike shared some of the data, the McKinney-Vento numbers, the number of students that are in transition, it's 200 students in the district. See large numbers of those students here at Ritenour High School. We have a goal to graduate 100% of our students, and there's a significant obstacle in the way for a lot of our high school students, meaning that they're in transition. They might not be sure where their next meal is coming from, and they're not sure where they're going to lay their head at night. And so, thankfully, we've got people that are working to fill those gaps for kids, and we've also got resilient kids that are realizing this situation might not change tomorrow, but I still have to persevere and overcome. I just need a little bit of support. It's not about helping people, or it's about just providing some support so that students can do it on their own and overcome.
So I'd also like to say, I know that our athletic department had quite a bit of a challenge going on to raise money for the food pantry. And I think they raised about $7,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, very nice.
That went to the food pantry. So
Yeah,
that
every night you see it on the news, and you read about it and hear it on the radio about, lines that are hours long, people waiting for food. When I come home from work and I drive down Page, there's a section of Page there in the city that has probably 3 or 4 churches within the same amount of blocks. And if I leave early enough, I see just cars just wrapped around the block. And the first time I saw it at the one church is what's going on here? What are they doing? Then I got to the beginning of the line and people are in the right lane of Page lining up. And it's probably 30, 40 cars deep just at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, waiting for the donation, the free food that they can get. It sends a message that a day in, day out, this is real. It's not something that the news Channel 4 found somewhere along the way. It's right here. It's within 10 miles of my house. It's real. These people are waiting to get the food that they can be handed so that they can have a meal that day. And I think whatever we can do, every organization that we have, if they're looking for something to do, it's how can we raise, it might not be money. Money's great. If you come up with 6 cans of green beans or something to take to the food pantry, that'd be one family maybe that has something to eat that night, along with some other things. But I think we really need to look at this time of year, all this time right now, as what can we do to help out our neighbors. And the best thing would be to go help the Ritenour Co-Care Pantry with stocking them back up.
Yeah, I will say also, the St. Louis Sports Youth Outreach,
Yes.
they did a toy and food drive this past weekend with Overland and St. Anne, and they had a huge turnout there too.
The people will rise to the occasion. We just got to let them know. So I would advocate putting it out there. If it's anywhere in the school district, we know something, put it out there. Put it on Facebook, put it on the other social medias, put it out on Twitter, whatever you can do.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move on to our consent agenda items.
So did you hear, yes, on 3.07? Yes, it was a yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I move we accept consent agenda items 4.01 through 4.06 as presented.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions? I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Clover Jones? Mr. Garden?
Did she say yes?
And I will vote yes, and I'll let you know as soon as it comes. Moving on to 5.01.
I'd like to make a motion to reconvene in closed session for state statute 610021 for the purpose of a discussion of personnel agenda items.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yeah.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Clover Jones? Mr. Garden?